And we're live. It's Transform Your Relationships. I'm Laura Rubenstein here with the awesome and wonderful Dr. Roberta Shaler. Hi, Roberta.
Hello, awesome and wonderful Laura Rubenstein. We have a topic today that is deep, 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 and anything but trivial.
Right. And it is trivializing women, where it happens, why it happens, what is it? Let's start with that. What does it mean to trivialize someone and or a woman?
Well, basically, to trivialize means to make something less important, less significant, or less complex than it is. So it's downplaying. It's making less. It's whitewashing the whatever it is we're talking about as less than. It's not as important. It's not as significant. It's not as complex. And then we end up with, oh, well, it doesn't matter very much at its final resting spot. So trivializing is just making light of something.
It also seems like it has something to do with denial.
Well, sure. If I don't want to deal with something and I trivialize it, then it doesn't need to be dealt with. And how often does that happen to women?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we get used to that pattern of, oh, it doesn't matter. I think women even do it to themselves.
Oh, well, yes. Well, after you've been done to, after a while, you start thinking that way yourself, or you can. And certainly that is not healthy. We want to have people empowered by listening even to our brief conversation today. No to the trivializing if someone's doing that to us. But yes, if that's the way we've been raised or that's the culture we've been in, we may accept it. And that's the first turnaround point.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. It's like a wake up call, like, oh, I put myself last, or, so-and-so says it's this way, or you have the voices of your family in your head. Mm-hmm. So where does it show up? How does trivializing, in particular women, show up?
Well, one big place it shows up is the workplace. I mean, certainly there is a bias. I think it's changed. I haven't been in a corporate setting or an organizational setting for 20 years, but certainly there was, when I was there was a culture of, the men are more robust. The men are the people you turn to. The men can be counted on, because women, of course, well, they have babies, they have menstrual cycles that men like to suggest are much more than we women feel they are sometimes. They think we're unreliable because we could have a baby. I'll tell you a story about it. It's quite funny. Long time ago, I was a school teacher. And I was pregnant with my second child, and I got pregnant pretty much early in the year, in November, in the school year. And this particular school district had a rule that, as they didn't like pregnant women in the schools. And so they would encourage you to leave as soon as you showed. So I was brought into the principal's office, and I was quite big. And I was brought in, and he said, now, the way that we judge when it's time for you to leave as a pregnant woman is that you have to stand against the wall, put your toes at the baseboard, and if your stomach hits, you have to go home. And I said, okay, but you first. And this was a huge guy, guy. And he looked at me, and I said, what could there possibly be the difference between your belly and mine? And he said, you're right, stay. And I was there until I gave birth. And I did the whole thing up. I had pictures of the developing baby that were, how babies develop and which stage I was at. And we used it for learning. And I was the first person ever to go full term in pregnancy in that school district. Because the idea that my size mattered, trivial.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was a way to say you don't matter if you have you can't possibly be as good as if you're pregnant or something, right?
Well, what do you think it does to you? I mean, doesn't his great big belly make him susceptible to heart disease? Why shouldn't he go home and take care of himself so the school district doesn't have to pay if he has a stroke? Why should I have to go home? Right? So the inequity was just something that I wasn't going to tolerate. And it turned out in my favor, of course, because I was able to work the whole time. In fact, I had a choir of 300 children on a stage when I was 8 months pregnant. It was a big first. Yes, and an extra. Yes.
That's great. So we see it in the workplace. I'm sure we see it also in personal relationships, where it's just a matter of fact, right? I mean, we see it in different, especially in certain cultures. Women are supposed to be subordinate.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole tradition was women were chattel. We were sort of traded for land or had a dowry that someone got something from. And in the medieval times, we were chattel. That's what we were called. It was just an exchange of like a donkey, So there's a great history of treating women as second-class citizens.
Up until the 40s or 50s, women couldn't own property.
No, couldn't. When I was a teenager, I was among the very first women to get a credit card, and you couldn't get a credit card in your own name. But I, of course, pushed for that because that wasn't fair. But that's the way it was. You just couldn't.
Right. Bank accounts, similar, at some point. But, okay, people might be thinking that was decades ago. Are we seeing it today? And there are leftover things. I mean, if it's right in high, we accept it too as normal and good. Even things like changing your name to the man's name. Why is the woman's name trivialized when one gets married? Oh, you make the excuse of having the kids have the same name. Well, I have friends who combined their last names and made a new last name, and they both changed their names. Why isn't that the norm, right?
Yeah, there are lots of possibilities. My daughter gave her son his own name, first, middle, and last. It relates to nobody, and he's very happy with this name. I didn't change my name when I married. I refused. Why would I do that? All my work is in my name. I'm not about to change my name and lose that. Some women change their name and then keep a professional identity with the name they had before. But it's just something that we really need to think through if you're going to do it. If you're going to engage in something that says the convention says you change your name, question the convention. Why? The idea of children having the same last name, I thought that through when my daughter decided to name her son something new. Does it really make any difference? Your identity is your identity. Is it that you are actually attached to a name? Maybe for some people, yes. Maybe for others, no. You have to think that through. The whole idea that women didn't have the vote, women didn't have these opportunities. Why? We're not chattel. We are not simple-minded. We work, we make money, we have a voice. Why trivialize it in any way? And you're right, in relationships, there's still this idea the man is the head of the house. Well, really? How many of those heads of houses are sitting back and letting the woman carry the load? Just because he happens to be male, does that make him the head of the house? Then we see how that plays out in different religious structures, that women are downplayed. I was working with a client for quite a while, and she got a little inheritance from her father when he passed, and she wanted to talk about developing her business. And so she asked her husband for permission to use her inheritance to work with me. And they drove from quite far away, 1,000 miles away, to have lunch with me so that he could approve of her spending time with me. And she belonged to a religious group that the women were not allowed to teach men. They could only teach women.
Hmm.
Right? Like, what's that about? Does not a woman have a good idea? Talk about trivializing.
And where does misogyny, this dislike or contempt for, that's an ingrained prejudice against women, where does that show up?
Well, particularly it shows up from men who have had poor mothering situations.
Hmm.
You can have very, very deep-rooted concern, fear, or hatred for a mother figure, and then decide to generalize that to the entire female population. And then we have things like the red pill movement, which gets some attention. And there's another one I heard of the other day, I don't remember the name, where men are getting together. The first time I heard about it was the Sterling Institute, where the men and the women were encouraged to look at what female and male attributes were and how to make that into a strong combination, capitalizing on the strengths. But these two movements, I've forgotten, as I say, the name of one, but they are misogynist. Women should be taken down. Women shouldn't rule the world. Women are bad, nasty, evil, horrible. And men subscribe to these. So if don't have a strong sense of the masculine, then they go, and that's my opinion, that they don't have a strong sense of masculinity. Now, they would scream blue murder at my saying that, because if you're strongly masculine or strongly feminine and you're happy in yourself, you don't have to belong to a hate group.
Yeah, you can't insult a happy person also. And it sounds like they're very threatened by women, because why would you have to put someone else down unless you are afraid of something?
Exactly. And that whole fear structure, that women are getting ahead of us, that's one of these constructs of that. Like, well, you've been ahead of women for forever. Why are you so threatened, as you say, that women are even considered equal?
Why is it a competition?
Exactly.
Why isn't it just people are people, and some are going to win, succeed, and use their strengths better than others, and contribute to society? But we can all contribute in our own way as we can, as we work on. It's really interesting to see how much fear there is that drives this hatred, and trivializing something or someone.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. The idea that women need to be put down, women need to be secluded. I've worked with some men, couples, where the men had some of these leanings, which is what sent me looking at the Red Pill Society. And there's just such a deep fear and hatred that I'm surprised that they engage with women, but they feel that they have the right to use them for sex. And so if you feel so strongly against women, don't touch them. Just leave them be. Go off into the woods somewhere and hang with your fellow women haters and bond with the guys, but don't trivialize women.
Well, there's a real issue going on in the world in different parts. They coined it femicide. It's killing of women just because they're women. There's societies that blame women for the sexual acts of men because they were tempting the men and the men couldn't resist or something. I don't know.
That's all their fault.
Yeah.
The Jezebels of the world. It's such an abdication of power for a man to say the woman made me do it. It's the same kind of argument that we find in courts where women used to be trivialized and still sometimes are. Like, she asked for rape. What was she wearing? What was her history? These questions that we have tried to outlaw in court, that when a woman is raped and she comes to court, they used to be able to ask, what had her previous sexual history been? But now that's frowned upon, because what has that got to do with the act that was perpetrated on her in this instance, right? But that took a whole lot of work, and it's still not eradicated. That a woman deserves to be safe in the world, not to be assaulted simply because she has a vagina. What are we doing with trans people? We are not recognizing and respecting their choices. Isn't it the largest group of people who are murdered are trans women who are working in the sex trade? Trans people in general frowned upon. Why? What are we afraid of? Why can't someone live their life in their own truth? Why do we have to trivialize that and think that we're superior in some way? I mean, it's a similar phenomenon that happens in that situation.
Right. There is so much fear, and thank you all for the love and the hearts we're getting here. To Kimberly's. Love it. So there is, it feels just so fear-based and really sad. And is there a piece of advice you'd like to give? Especially for women who may just becoming aware of, like, oh yeah, this is, the trivialization happens in subtle ways, like we were talking about, whether it's you're putting on a wedding ring or you're got a thing that you're like, oh my gosh, it's my name, I've got to change my name to his name, or you're deferring to him because he's the man.
Well, wedding ring ceremonies, I think they should be equal. If you're going to have rings, each person should wear one. Don't get the mark of being chattel, unless it's a coexisting bond that you each have made to each other, and it's a symbol of something much, much healthier. But in my work, of course, I mean, my new community and my new courses and all are under the banner of Emerging Empowered. So yes, Laura, I have a lot to say about how to do that.
Because where should someone start before even taking your course?
Well, my course is for people who are with toxic people, and they are looking at whether they should leave or not, and how to do it if you decide to do it, and how to recover after. But I think for any woman to actually realize the depth of the concepts we've been talking about today, yes, that's real for me. Yes, I've experienced that. Yes, I've been made to feel like a second-class citizen. I've been second-guessed. Are you sure you can do that? How about physical strength? Women can be strong too. Certainly it's nice when somebody comes along and takes your suitcase down out of the overhead. It's not, they're just being kind. I appreciate that.
That's not trivialization.
That's exactly my point. It is not. That is chivalry or kindness or thoughtfulness or whatever. But if I was there back in the day, I can attest to it. I did it. I was saying, I'm strong. I am woman. Hear me roar. Don't. It's not necessary. I can manage my luggage. I had those few years before I realized that no, I could accept lovely things that were thoughtful and kind, and not think that they were insulting me. But it was very strong in me. In fact, Laura, when I was on the speaking trail for so many years, part of one of my talks was about my confusion I said, I had one foot in Betty Friedan and one foot in Betty Crocker in my upbringing, and I didn't know whether to bake a cake or burn a bra, very confusing. And there's still confusions about that, but not nearly for the generations that followed. But it's important for us to understand, who are we? What are our values? What's okay with us? What's not okay with us? And to have those three qualities, equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, as the basis for calibrating a healthy relationship. And if somebody's trivializing you, you don't have equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, because it starts with equality. They don't even see you as an equal.
Yeah, yes. And we can come to help each other as equals and celebrate each other as equals and celebrate our differences. So if one has strength and one has, some skills in creativity, wow, what can you create together? There's no trivializing necessary, right?
No, it's celebrating, not trivializing.
Yeah. So I love that. So we can acknowledge where we've been trivialized, where it comes out of fear, where it comes out of control, and we can celebrate and acknowledge where we want to celebrate the positive aspects of our beingness and our differences. I just think that we are so due for the conversation to keep happening, and there are many women who are in relationships that are not equal, and they are trivialized, and they are afraid they can't do better.
Well, they may be afraid they can't do better. And another fear would be, what happens if I change my behavior? And start small. Don't go cold turkey from passive to aggressive. Start small. Just start exerting a little boundary and small things. Test yourself out. Do it a little more. Do it a little more. See how that works for you. Calibrate and explore. And as you do that, you can take up more space. Now, I'm constantly saying to my clients, just think of bringing your shoulders back, expanding your chest, thinking about taking up the space, occupy the space, and think of yourself as rightfully so. You have the right, because you have the right to draw breath and take up space. Therefore, you have the right to say what you think, feel, need, want, prefer, and remember. And that's basic to equality.
Basic, so basic. Breathe and know you have a right to breathe. Be and know you have a right to be. Stand and know you have a right to stand. Do what feels good to take care of you.
Absolutely. And it has nothing to do with trampling on other people. That's where equality comes in. Take up your space, be engaged, and enjoy other people's taking up their space, and then have a exchange of ideas, an exchange of strengths, an exchange of things that we enjoy and can talk about and can do for one another. And don't be threatened by the beingness of another human. Be focused on being you, living your values, living your vision, living your beliefs. And one of my beliefs is inequality. So let's start there.
You believe in equality.
Yes, two separate words.
Two separate words. We want to see more equality happening. Why not?
And equity.
And equity.
Yeah.
And let's define I know we've done it before, but let's define the difference.
Well, equality means everybody gets the same, meaning no matter how much money you have, everybody gets $100. But equity means, to get everybody to the same level, somebody needs $200, somebody needs $100, and somebody doesn't need money at all. And so we create equity. So we need to look at equality and equity.
Hear, hear. So we invite you to do that, to find equity, to be a part of bringing equity out there in whatever way you see possible. I just
Yeah.
think it's where we need to go to heal, to have harmony and have harmony.
And it all starts in your own mind and heart. So try it on there first. See whether or not you are living in equality and equity. And if not, start having a conversation with yourself. What would it take for me to feel that those two things were present in my life?
And then you can emerge empowered.
Yes, then you can be emerging empowered. Yes.
Great. Well, we will be back again with another stimulating conversation in another couple of weeks. Thank you, Dr. Roberta, for talking about women, how we're trivialized, and how to bring equality and equity to our lives.
And thank you, Laura. So many good ideas and insights. I hope it stimulated everyone who listens.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.